What's up everybody, Demon back, and welcome to a brand new video. This one is going to be doing an in-depth review for the movie War of the Gargantuas. So the year is 1965, and Toho is pumping out a new kaiju movie yearly. This is because of the success found with movies such as Godzilla and Mothra and Rodan. The movie that they make in 1965 is Frankenstein Conquers the World. Now, Frankenstein Conquers the World is the movie about the heart of Frankenstein being taken to Hiroshima, exposed to radiation, and turning into a giant kaiju version of Frankenstein. This movie eventually had the sequel in the year 1966, War of the Gargantuas, which is one of the greatest kaiju movies ever made. War of the Gargantuas is not only one of my favorite kaiju movies, but it's also one of my favorite movies. So it's interesting to note that I'm not going to be super harsh on this movie because I love it so much. Now you might be asking, why are you doing this review now? You haven't even finished Godzillathon yet. Well, the reason I'm doing this War of the Gargantuas review now is actually because the movie turned 50 years old in 2016, and I wanted to celebrate its 50th anniversary with an in-depth review of the movie. Now, does that mean I'm never going to come back to it? Absolutely not. In fact, someday I plan on re-reviewing this movie after seeing the Japanese cut of both this and Frankenstein Conquers the World. I will be doing a double review of that, but that will probably take years down the line, just so I can see the movies enough times to be familiar with them front and back. This is going to be a review of the English cut of War of the Gargantuas, because that's the one I'm more familiar with. So I'm going to jump into the plot now, and we'll go through the plot, and I'll talk about each point and how it related to how I like this movie or not. So the movie begins with an octopus attacking a boat. This octopus attacking the boat is handled really well. We see tentacles coming in through the window of the boat and grabbing the captain of the boat. Now it throws him up against a wall. He tries to get away. We see the octopus from outside the window. Really great special effects here, with the octopus being seen outside of the window while this man is going on inside of the boat being attacked. Really cool special effects here. One thing that this movie is very commendable for is how ambitious it is with its special effects. The octopus looks really good in this movie, most likely because it's Toho's third attempt at doing an octopus battle. King Kong vs. Godzilla used a real octopus as well as a fake one for some closer-up shots of Kong attacking it. Now this worked to great effect and looked amazing with the real octopus attacking a miniature hut. In Frankenstein Conquers the World, they used an entirely fake octopus, which didn't work to great effect. In War of the Gargantuas, I'm not quite sure how they handled the effects. I believe that it is a combination of both real and fake, but whatever it is, it works amazing. Like I said, this is their third time at it, so you'd think they would have it down. So the octopus attacking the boat is then attacked by the Green Gargantua, aka Gyra, and I will be referring to the Gargantuas by their real name in this review. Although their real names are not said in the English cut of the movie, their names are Gyra for the Green Gargantua and Sanda for the Brown Gargantua. Gyra defeats the octopus and heads after the boat. These effects are really well handled as well, with Gyra sinking the ship. As a little kid watching this scene, I was absolutely horrified watching this Green Gargantua attack this ship after seemingly saving it from an octopus. Later we find out what his motivations are for saving it from the octopus and then attacking the ship, but at this point it is completely mysterious in the movie. One thing that must be noted with this movie is that this is Haruo Nakajima's best work. Now don't get me wrong, his work portraying Godzilla and various other monsters such as Varan don't go unnoticed. In fact, he is what made Godzilla what he is today. Although, this is Haruo Nakajima's favorite role, considering this is the only one where you can see his eyes. I personally think this is his best role, not that I prefer Gyra over Godzilla, but I personally think that this is Nakajima's best role, because of how free he was to portray Gyra with very little suit over him. Usually, he was covered under hundreds of pounds of Godzilla suit, but this time, he had a form-fitting suit that he could do more expressions with, perform more intricate moves, and even, as he notes, show off his eyes. The survivor of the sinking boat is hospitalized, and Dr. Stewart investigates his claims. Dr. Stewart, on his way to the hospital room, mentions Frankenstein's severed hand from Frankenstein Conquers the World, the only reference to Frankenstein Conquers the World that makes its way into the English cut of this movie. The sunken ship is searched, with only remains of clothes being found. The boat survivor tells the story of Gyra killing his crew. Stewart reveals that 5 years ago, he had a Gargantua in captivity. It was a brown Gargantua that he used to study. Akemi explains that she raised the Gargantua before it escaped. 2 fishermen are killed by Gyra. This scene is incredibly cool because of how it was handled. As a little kid, this also used to freak me out, just because there's a great shot of a fisherman looking over the boat and seeing Gyra down below. He's terrified and then is knocked into the water. Now, as a little kid, I used to always imagine that that would be me. One day I'd be out on the ocean, look into the water, there would be a giant Gargantua sitting there, knock the boat, I'd fall in, and I'd get eaten. That's just how I always thought it would go as a little kid. I also used to be just terrified of Gyra in general because of a later scene that happens, and we'll talk about that later. But Gyra was one of my bigger fears as a little kid. Even though I loved this movie, I would still watch it, but I would be absolutely terrified by the Green Gargantua. Back at a fishing village, Gyra's head rises up out of the water and people run in fear. Now people are starting to suspect that what sunk the boat was indeed the Gargantua, but the question is, was it Stewart's Gargantua? That is something that's toyed around with up until the big reveal later in the movie. Now Stewart, believing that it's not, goes to the mountain to investigate claims of giant footprints that have been found up there. The giant footprints are found and wind up being real. Well, at the same time that this searching of the footprints is going on, a boat is investigated and some green flesh is found. Later in the movie, Gyra attacks an airport. He kills and eats a woman right in front of the screen, which used to terrify me as a little kid. This was the scene I was referring to. As a young child, I used to always imagine that I would be at a sleepover at my friend's house or even at my house sleeping on the couch. I'd look out the window and I would see the Gargantua there. There was even one time when it was a windy night, it was dark outside, and there was an evergreen tree outside of my house. I saw the tree waving in the wind and I just saw it was all green. We had previously watched War of the Gargantuas and it terrified me so much I had to run up to my mom's room. This airport scene is really well handled, and I have to give credit to the special effects because they are amazing. Some of the double projection shots in this movie are so good. There are a lot of composites as well, where you can see Gyra moving into the airport while people are running around in the foreground. He's in the background doing his own thing. There's also a really great miniature airport that they use that Gyra knocks over some walls and then reaches into a building. The special effects in this scene are incredible, and when the sun shines through the clouds and Gyra takes off jumping into the ocean, you don't once think that it's a man in a suit. You think that it is a giant monster attacking an airport. These special effects are so incredible, I have to give so much credit to them for making this movie as great as they are. It's at this point explained that Gyra seems sensitive to sunlight because he has spent so much time in the water that he's not exposed to light. So Tokyo goes into a light-out state to avoid Gyra coming on land. Now we have an awful music number that as a little kid I would have to skip, and even nowadays when I watch the movie, I still can't bear to sit through the whole thing without just thinking, why is this necessary to the movie, where we have a full music number come out of nowhere? This American girl, I don't know if she was popular in the States at the time, but this was just the worst decision made in the movie. This American girl comes on, she sings the song The Words Get Stuck in My Throat. It lasts way longer than it needed to. It's boring to watch, not a good song. I don't like this scene at all. I can't stand watching it. Luckily, towards the end of her song, Gyra shows up, picks her up, before he gets to eat her. I think it would have been, more justice would be served to the viewer had he gotten to eat her. But before he gets to, they shine a spotlight in his eye, he drops her onto the stage, she's fine, he runs away. It's a bummer because I would have liked to see that girl get eaten. Gyra comes on land again, moving towards fires, leading him through a village and to a military ambush that is set up in the woods. Now during this ambush, a weapon that is commonly used in Toho movies, including the Godzilla series, all the way up to the Millennium series, the Maser tanks are introduced. These things are awesome. They are some cool looking army tanks that have a big dish on the front that shoots electricity. I don't know why the American military doesn't use these things. I feel like if we could master that technology, these things would do a lot of damage in military warfare. So the military ambushes Gyra, shooting lasers at his legs, firing tanks at him. He's picking up tanks, throwing them into village houses, getting shot, just getting blown up by Maser tanks, shooting him with electricity. He is really not having a good time. They electrocute the water, knocking him down when he's standing in a river. They just bomb the holy hell out of him, and he can't take it. So he basically gives up, falls over, is about ready to die. We hear this ominous roar boom from the mountains, and then all of a sudden, Sanda, the brown Gargantua, just comes charging down the mountains, grabs his brother, saves him, turns around, signals to the military. This is one thing that I absolutely love. Signals to the military multiple times to stop firing, waving his arm and growling. and then he heads off into the woods, retreating with his brother. Now, one thing that I love about this movie is the characterizations of Sanda and Gaira. They are not just monsters in rubber suits. They are not just people in rubber suits. They are not just, mindless creatures. They have personality. You have Gaira, who is a lot more on edge. She had to grow up in the ocean. They explain that he later in the movie, it's explained that he comes from the ocean. He grew up there. He was not exposed to humankind until much later. So what he does is he eats people because that's all he knows to do. He is just 100% built on survival instinct, and he is there to fight. Whereas Sanda was raised in captivity and escaped and then lived peacefully in the mountains. He is a completely different character, a lot more compassionate. He has feelings towards humans, understands them, doesn't want to hurt them, leaves them alone. He even understands, some emotions. He later in the movie, we'll talk about some more things that he does for people, but right here is a key example. Instead of attacking the military, which he could have easily done and wiped them out, he instead grabs his brother and signals to the military, please stop firing, we're on our way, we won't cause you any more trouble, before they leave. I love the characterization of Sanda, one of my favorite kaiju characterizations ever. So Sanda tends to his brother Gaira, which is a really awesome thing, showing he even has care for his brother. He knows that they're related, he is a good brother pretty much. So he cares for him, puts water on his wounds, tries to patch him up. They sit by a lake. It is a really great scene because it shows the care that's between these two, which makes the end all more heartbreaking. Some teens are hiking around the lake and they are killed by Gaira. Now, Akemi slips off a cliff and is caught by Sanda. Now, the thing is, Sanda, on his way down to catch Akemi, winds up getting a boulder fall and crack his leg, so he has a broken leg through the rest of the movie. One other thing that I find really cool is that you see weakness in these kaiju. They are not just there, messing things up, getting shot with tanks, not even noticing, like, Godzilla. They actually respond to it. They have pain, they have feelings, they have emotions, they have characterizations. I love it so much. I can't get enough of this movie, and I can't get enough of these kaiju. So the plan is put into place to napalm the Gargantuas before they get out of the woods. This doesn't necessarily work because as Sanda's coming back to Gaira after saving Akemi, he finds Gaira sitting there with tons of clothes all right next to him, tons of chewed up clothes, all the hikers from before that Gaira ate. Sanda comes over, sees that he's been eating people, and this scene is incredible. So you see just the look in Sanda's eyes when he sees this. You don't need a word of dialogue to explain what he's thinking. He reaches over, grabs a tree. Right now he is realizing, I saved a terrible thing. This thing that's my brother is not like me. This is a bad creature and it needs to be stopped. This is one thing that seems a bit out of character for Sanda because he immediately walks over and smacks Gaira with a tree, which later on in the movie we'll see him get, back into the characterization that I associate him with. But right here, he attacks him with a tree. I think this is just supposed to be more of like a warning, like, hey, there's more where that came from, instead of like, oh, I'm gonna kill you with this tree kind of thing. So he beats him with the tree once. Gaira gets up and immediately attacks him and then takes off. So Sanda has to go chase down Gaira, who has both working legs, much faster than he is. Because of that, he gets away and Sanda just has to try and follow him. Gaira gets into the ocean to heal, and we don't see what happens to Sanda at this point. Gaira shows back up in Tokyo towards the very end of the movie, causing some damage. Walking around, he tries to eat Akemi again. Sanda shows up, very last second, makes a beeline for Tokyo, catches Akemi right before she gets killed, saves her. Stuart takes her into an underground subway. They are both fine there. They make it out for the rest of the movie down there. Akemi is injured though, she's knocked out. Sanda shows up though, he stops Gaira from eating her. Gaira comes over and just wants to attack Sanda. But here's that characterization I was talking about. Before that happens, Sanda is sitting there multiple times, waving his arm, telling Gaira to back down, please, we don't need to do this. He is pleading with his brother, we don't need to fight, this needs to end peacefully, don't kill these people, multiple times. One thing I absolutely love is you can see the human influence that happened with Sanda when he was in captivity. He got basically he became the good guy. When he was in captivity, he was exposed to so much good from humankind that he is not a monster like his brother. He is just misunderstood. One thing that Ishiro Honda loved to talk about, his famous quote, monsters are tragic beings being born too tall, too strong, too heavy, that kind of thing. This is brought up with Sanda. He is the good guy. He is doing the right thing. He is doing what the humans want to do, and that is try and de-escalate the situation. But he is still viewed as a bad guy by the military just because of how big he is, and I absolutely love that. Now, there is a line from Dr. Stewart, Brothers at War, kind of like Countries I Know. That is some of the other allegory in this movie, with the movie being pointing out different countries going to war with each other. I believe this is supposed to be a reference to the Cold War, with Gyra and Sanda being America and Russia. Sanda, I believe, is supposed to represent America, Gyra, Russia, who is a more offensive kind of brooding force, whereas America or Sanda is kind of there trying to de-escalate the situation and then just getting involved in it, which makes the ending of the movie so much better when you see that the two wind up killing each other as a result of their anger. So now Gyra attacks first, this time biting Sanda's hand. From this point on to the end of the movie, is an awesome fight in Tokyo where the two are grabbing each other, throwing each other around. You know, you can tell Sanda's holding back the whole time, which is another thing that makes his character so tragic, is he is just still trying to de-escalate the situation, whereas Gyra's picking him up, throwing him into buildings. These sets look awesome. These miniatures look great. You know, you get Sanda falling into some buildings on the dock. They're fighting each other. It takes up until the Maser tanks are brought in, start firing away at Gyra. They are killing him, so he jumps into the ocean and gets away. Now, as he's trying to swim away, Sanda realizes there is no victory. He must die. The only way things can be good again is if we both die. And I love that. You can just tell that he knows that he's going to have to sacrifice his life in order to take down Gyra, his brother. So he jumps into the water, picks up a boat, slams it onto Gyra, catches up to him. They swim away, fighting each other the whole time. The movie ends with the military bombing the two, setting off a volcano in the ocean, which explodes and kills both of them. Akemi is saved, and, you know, our Dr. Stewart is with her. They survive the end of events of the movie, but you do get the line that both Sanda and Gyra got killed in the volcano. There's no identified bodies, which is a huge sequel setup, but they are dead. Now, this movie is awesome. I love this movie so much. Everything down to, you know, the special effects look so incredible. The music is so good. The characters are alright. They're not, you know, anything mind-blowing, but they are still good considering the kind of movie this is. A lot of the times these movies get, you know, bad reputations because, just people in rubber suits breaking cardboard buildings, knocking things down, terrible human characters, boring. That's not the case with this movie. I think specifically because the human characters are so focused on the kaiju plot that you don't feel, you know, detracted from it. You feel like you're still watching the same monster movie. You don't feel like all of a sudden in Godzillaverse or Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, you don't feel like all of a sudden you have to get involved in this princess subplot because you're already dealing with the kaiju. You know, this one is just strictly focused on the kaiju, something that Shin Gojira did really well. Just focus on the kaiju. Don't worry about, you know, some sort of subplot with the humans. That's not the point of this movie. That's what this one does. This one gives the kaiju great characterizations, on par with the way they handled King Kong back in '33 and even 2005. I absolutely love it. Now, War of the Gargantuas is a huge missed opportunity for a sequel. This movie is so good, they could have done so much with a sequel, and I have the plan for the sequel. I'm not going to get very much into depth with it, just because, who knows, someday if I, wind up in Japan, I'll definitely try and get my ideas out there, but it would involve a direct sequel to this movie. And this movie sequel baits so much with the idea of we cannot kill these things because if we do, their cells are going to regenerate into new kaiju. It happened before. Frankenstein's cells regenerated into Sanda. Sanda's cells regenerated into Gyra. So if both of them, Sanda and Gaira, died, and they died the way they did, it is stated early on in the movie that this will cause a world of the Gargantuas. Something that this movie sets up so much for and does nothing with is the fact that there should be more Gargantuas running around this Showa universe. We never see it followed up on. I know there was originally going to be a Godzilla vs. the Gargantuas movie, but it never happened, so we need something to happen to follow up on this movie. I don't care that it is 50 years later. I'm pretty sure everyone who's a fan of this movie doesn't care that it's 50 years later. Don't remake it because you're not going to do it justice. Just give it a sequel. That's all it needs, is a sequel to follow up on the success of this movie, to follow up on the success of Shin Godzilla, to follow up on the success of 2014, to follow up on the future success of obviously Kong Skull Island's going to do really well. We need a sequel for this movie. Come on, get off your butt, Toho. Help us out. That is my point, is this movie is still relevant. And although it's been 50 years, this movie still has a loyal fan base of people who love it. I mean, why wouldn't you? It works on so many levels. Special effects, I can't stress this enough, are so good in this movie. The character of the Kaiju is really well handled. Human characters is fine. You know, music is amazing. Frankenstein Conquers the World was very prototype for this movie. This movie took what that one did and made it perfect, I think, with the music. Now, this movie just hits so many different levels. I am amazed it never got a sequel. With the way Toho handled their movies back then, I am so shocked this didn't get a sequel. So, my point to this review is not only is this movie amazing, and I think anyone who hasn't seen it should go watch it, but also that this movie is still relevant and it can still be worked with. You can still do things with this movie. No one really cares if it's been 50 years since we got a sequel, or since the original. You could get a sequel just as long as you explain what happened in the first one. People don't really care. James Bond is still going on for the past however many years, and it's still supposed to be the same continuity, so why can't this? That's my point. So, overall, what would I rate this movie? I would rate this movie a 9 out of 10 because it is that good. I think it is just... I love this movie, and it is my 4th favorite movie pretty much ever. I mean, maybe in terms of every movie I've ever seen, it wouldn't make it 4th, but at the very least, it's my 4th favorite Kaiju movie, right after King Kong vs. Godzilla, the original 1954 Godzilla, as well as the original 1933 King Kong. I love this movie, and I think everyone should go check it out. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. D-Man